What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another daily drop brought to you by TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Tourney, and joining me as he always does is THI publisher Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for another Carolina Hoops related drop, and this is a little bit of a fun one and an interesting one as well, because I haven't really heard anybody talking about this topic. I haven't really heard any discussion surrounding this topic, but based on some conversations you've had in the past couple of weeks with some well-sourced individuals, I think it is something that should be talked about, and it kind of makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways when you look at how college basketball in particular in the landscape with the NIT rankings is changed, and quite frankly, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So we're going to be talking this one. Should UNC consider hosting a multi-team event every season? And what we mean by that is that this would be maybe a 4 to 6 team tournament you have in November or something like that?
8. So you get 3 games that don't count toward your allotted 29.
And in terms of November, December time of year, and you're talking, you're not necessarily talking top 25 teams. You may be talking a little bit of a mix, maybe some smaller teams in state, maybe mid-majors. I think that can kind of be up for discussion. But having some kind of multi-team event in November or in December early in the season that just, can help boost your NET a little bit more than going and playing some of these road games and some of these, in particular, some of these neutral site games and get some of these big opponents that, again, just don't end up affecting and helping your NIT. It ends up hurting you more than anything. So I think it's definitely one that's up for discussion. So AJ, explain the format, maybe like we've talked about in this one a little bit more, and maybe the thought process about why we're even talking about this in the first place. Because again, I haven't really seen anybody have a discussion on something like this before.
So I had a conversation with someone very much in the know recently about the net. I call it the NET. Everyone else calls it the net. I call it the NET because I feel like I'm saying RPI. It makes
a little bit more sense.
So we were talking about the net and how last year with the ACC, for example, everyone was kind of pigeonholed by Christmas. The league, it was very difficult to move up in the league in your net ranking by winning inside the league because they had some losses early in the year. And then other leagues like the Big 12 that had 10 teams, it was easier for those teams to move around because they had some wins. They had a lot of opportunities to rack up wins outside the league because they don't play in nearly as many conference games. So this is sort of born out of the ACC playing a 20-game schedule. So there's very little room for error outside the league. If you play 3 real quality non-conference opponents and you go 0-3, you're kind of screwed in a lot of ways. And when you look at UNC last year, early in the year, when the Tar Heels got that terrible start, they lose to Iowa State. They lose in 4 overtimes to Alabama, and then they go lose in Indiana. Now, the Indiana thing, that was part of the annual schedule with the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Now that will be the ACC SEC Challenge. But what ultimate good did Carolina get out of playing in Portland? And this was part of the discussion. Okay, they played Portland, whatever. And then they lose to Iowa State, lose to Alabama, and losing in 4 overtimes to a team that was number 1 in the country at one point and was one of the number 1 seeds in a tournament, didn't help Carolina. It just went, the computer just said, nasty, get it out. It doesn't help. So as the conversation went on, it was suggested that, if North Carolina were to host an MTE, a multi-team event, and MTEs do not count against the regular part of your schedule, there are additional games you can play. If they hosted one in Greensboro, not at the Dean Dome, because they would be home games in the Dean Dome, but if they hosted one, let's say in Greensboro, A, they would be neutral site games. B, Carolina would get the majority of the revenue from the tournament. So it's a way to make money instead of going out to Portland and spending money. And that team was on the road for 8 days, 9 days.
Expensive.
So exactly. So, you want to see those kind of early season games, but at the same time, you also want to make damn tournament. And you want to bolster your resume. And then the net works a little bit differently. So let's say they played in that 8-team tournament in Greensboro, and you want to make sure there's 4 teams from North Carolina. So UNC's in there, and there's also Western Carolina, Elon, which is close by, and maybe App State or something, or ECU, right?
Greensboro.
And then you bring in 4 teams from outside the region, but nobody daunting. You bring in an Oregon State. You bring in, Utah.
Mm-hmm.
You bring in Ole Miss, and you bring in somebody pretty good, someone like a Providence or something like that. So Carolina takes care of Western Carolina in the first game, and then they beat Ole Miss in the second game, and then they beat Providence or Oregon State in the finals or something like that. They will actually help their net ranking more doing that than going out to Portland. Even now, if they were to win out in Portland, that would be different. But their games are so challenging. They don't win those events anymore. They used to win them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They don't win those anymore. So it's being discussed as not just a way to affect the net ranking, but also they're looking for additional revenue streams at UNC. And that's another pod for another day. But there are windows of opportunity to increase revenue, to move things forward, not just across the board for the league, but for individual schools. And North Carolina is one of those schools that with a little bit more autonomy over revenue. And again, that's a different topic for a different discussion, but this would be an example. It could really enhance its revenue significantly, or it would be far more competitive with the two big leagues than it is right now. So when you've got to fund 28 sports, you've got to find ways to fund those sports. You got to bring in some money. And I don't think they're going to cut sports anytime soon, although it wouldn't be a bad mistake to do that with respect to overall revenue and directing more money toward football. And let's face it, basketball is a massive revenue sport. So I think it would make a lot of sense. It would get a lot more Carolina fans a chance to see them play. And I think it would be an interesting tournament. It would be better to do it that way than have a bunch of patsies come in. And it would be better to do that than it would be to have, Arizona and UConn and Michigan State come in. That'd be a lot of fun for fans, but you could play really, really well 2 days in a row and lose, and you get nothing out of it. You get screwed when it comes to the NIT. So that's sort of the basis of the discussion.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, North Carolina is such a good basketball state in general. It's got so much history and so much big-time programs and just so much love for basketball among the people that live here, especially college basketball. So I've never really understood why Carolina doesn't try to take advantage of that more and doesn't try to host events like this a little bit more. Again, because A, you're bringing in money. B, it's in Greensboro. You're going to attract a big time crowd. Just go look at any NCAA tournament game or neutral site game Carolina's ever played in Greensboro. You're going to attract a lot of Carolina fans because there's a lot of Carolina fans in that part of the state. And there's a lot of Carolina fans that are going to drive an hour or 2 hours down the road to watch them play in the first place, no matter where they go. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And again, I know why Carolina does these plays in these, these tournaments in Portland and stuff like that. But for me, Carolina's got such a difficult schedule anyway, and they always tend to play a lot of good teams. They're always going to get paired up with the best team in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. This is what Carolina does. Now it's SEC. I guarantee you they're going to get paired up with 1 to 3 best teams in the SEC. That's just who Carolina gets paired up with. So Carolina's always going to play difficult games. They're always going to have difficult games on their schedule. But with the NET being what it is, and with the NET being such a flawed system that just doesn't make a lot of sense right now, unless that system's going to change sometime, it's almost like smarter for Carolina to say, okay, we can generate some money doing this. And A, we can boost our NET ranking that'll help us get into the tournament. Because Carolina, I mean, you mentioned it in the podcast we did last week. What is it? 4 Februaries in a row that Carolina hasn't been a guaranteed lock for the NCAA tournament pretty much. And that's just not acceptable. So I think that doing something like this would attract a lot of crowds, would involve smaller programs in the state, which I think is cool. And you're going to attract fans from those universities as well. And then you bring in, like you said, no patsies, but you bring in some teams, some mid-majors, or some teams that, historically usually have pretty solid programs, and you bring them in and get them involved as well. To me, it makes a lot of sense, AJ. And again, money makes the world go round. Everything's about making money, especially when it comes to these major college programs like North Carolina, who, like you said, has to support a lot more programs than most teams across, or most universities across the country do. So bringing in additional revenue is always a plus for Carolina. In a lot of ways, like you said, is a need for Carolina at this point as well, unless they want to have to start cutting programs at some point, which I don't think they ultimately want to have to do. So to me, this is a no-brainer. And I'm just surprised it's something that maybe didn't happen earlier, but the NET hasn't been around for too long. So maybe the NET coming in has maybe made some ears perk up a little bit more and say, maybe we need to do something different.
That's it. And I'll add something about the net in a second, but they used to host the Diet Pepsi Tournament of Champions. It was a Harris Teeter Tournament of Champions in Charlotte that started out. I think the first ever one, you had Carolina, Missouri, Arizona, and maybe Temple, and they were all in the top 12. Mm-hmm. And initially, it was a power tournament in Charlotte at the old Charlotte Coliseum. And over time, it wasn't as good. In fact, I remember covering it one year when the 8-20 year when Carolina was just horrific. St. Joe's was there. They were ranked 16th. Carolina was in the 8-20 season. Then you had Georgia State and College of Charleston. And I think College of Charleston may have won it that year. Mm-hmm. I think they beat St. Joe's. And anyway, so that wasn't a great lineup. And then that tournament went away because it wasn't as strong after a while. But I think the last tournament was 20 years ago, the Pepsi tournament champions. So I think Greensboro would be a good spot. It makes a lot of sense. And the thing about the net is the net isn't going anywhere for a few more years. The person I spoke with said, look, you had the COVID year, you had a normal year, COVID year, semi-normal year, fully normal year. They don't really know. They don't have enough track record with the net to really get a full gauge of it, which I don't think was this person's opinion as much as it was the prevailing thought of the people who affect these kinds of changes. So the net's going to be there for a couple of years. So why not do something like that? Now they're locked in to stuff. Obviously, they're going to the Bahamas this year. They're going to Maui after that. And I think that's what they do. They go to in fact, the team that won the title in 2017, they went to Maui, I think, in November of 2016, and they played at Hawaii before they played in Maui. They went and played 4 games out there, and a game in Hawaii does not count against your allotment, your allowed number of games. So technically, you could get 4 extra games by going out there. But I think it would be really cool. I know NC State one year, I covered the whole thing. They had a tournament at PNC back in November of 2004, where they had a lot of teams in there. It was an 8-team event. It was counted as an MTE because back then you could get an approval for that if it goes to some kind of charitable donation. Like there were Hispanic College Fund tournaments and things like that. And Oregon State was in that one. In fact, I remember my friend Taylor Zarzer was doing Oregon State radio because the main radio guy had to go back because of the Civil War between Oregon State and football. So Taylor was actually their radio play-by-play guy for a couple of games. That was a cool tournament. I think Delaware was there, maybe Monmouth. They probably could have had better teams there. State won it. But otherwise, you don't have those in North Carolina, which doesn't make any sense. There should be something like that in Raleigh every year. There should be something like that in Greensboro. Maybe back-to-back weekends in Greensboro. One year State's the main host. The next week it's Carolina. The next year it's Duke, the main host. The next week Carolina, whatever the case may be. I would like to see a lot of that stuff. And it's a way to manipulate the net. And some coach, like Coach K, was always really good at manipulating the RPI. And I'm not saying this is criticism at all, but he would look ahead and say, you know what? Holy Cross supposed to win that league. Let's bring in Holy Cross. Penn's supposed to win the Ivy. Let's bring them in. So you beat these teams, end up winning 22 games, and it really enhanced your RPI. You can somewhat do the same thing with this as well. But the neutral site, you get a neutral site win over a team that's in the middle of the SEC. That's going to be a Q1 win for you because they're going to be in the top 75. And that's a way to go. And you should win that game. It's almost like a home game, but you get a Q1 win out of it. If you play Ole Miss at home, it's not going to be a Q1 win. And one thing we've learned in the last couple of years is that the only thing that matters are Q1 wins.
Yeah, for sure.
With North Carolina, it's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
You're going to have 35 Q2 wins. Well, theoretically speaking, no one cares. You got to get Q1 wins. So if you have Arizona State and you have Ole Miss on your schedule in Greensboro on a Friday night and a Saturday night, and you can notch a couple of Q1 wins there, then that helps. I mean, think about it. Carolina fans were pulling for Ohio State in the end of February last year. Ohio State was second from the bottom of the Big Ten because they beat them in Madison Square Garden in New York. So Ohio State wasn't going to fall too far because the Big Ten was already their little realm of net rankings was established. The ACC's was established a little bit lower. So Carolina was getting more value out of Ohio State beating somebody than themselves beating somebody. And that's screwy. Mm-hmm. That's an absurd system, and hopefully it will change sometime. But until it does, go ahead and manipulate it, play some of these games.
Agreed.
They won't be penalized.
No, it's a flawed system. It doesn't, and again, like you said, it's not going to be changed anytime soon. So, like you said, manipulate it. That's almost like work smarter, not harder kind of thing, because it's already hard enough.
Absolutely.
You're pitching it's just, when the system doesn't make sense, you might as well do something to make it work in your favor a little bit better. Because again, Carolina has been hurt by it in the past few years, and a lot of teams have, because it just doesn't really make a lot of sense, and it pigeonholes a lot of what you do early in the year, which doesn't really matter because teams get better as the year go on. That's the whole point of winning a national title. You're the best team at the end of the year. Doesn't mean you were the best team in November. So you shouldn't be pigeonholed and punished for losing a couple games in November and not be rewarded as much for winning games in some big games in February. To me, it's a system that needs to be changed, but if it's not going to be changed, you might as well just, hate the player, don't hate the player, hate the game, kind of thing.
Let me add to that, because this is all intertwined in the conversation, is that they need to figure out a way to add more weight to the end of your schedule anyway. How you play this, maybe value the quality of wins a little bit more as you go up, as you get toward the end of the year. Because a lot of it, one thing that hurts the ACC is there's a lot of movement. The ACC recruits well, so there's a lot of freshmen, there's a lot of transfers that come in, so there's a lot of roster turnover in the league, more so than the Big Ten. And I would say comparable or more so than the SEC, more so than even the Big 12's had a lot, but certainly with the Big Ten, which is always highly rated and everything. And then they failed to achieve in the postseason as much as what the regular season dictates they should do. You're hurting yourself. So if you're Boston College and you're going to, you're going to Miami of Ohio, which you should never schedule that game anyway, and it's mid-November and you've got 11 new guys in a team, you're not going to win that game, and you hurt yourself. So ACC teams, if you're going in one of these 3-team tournaments and you're Florida State and you've got 9 new guys, and you're going to that tournament in Charleston, and all of a sudden you're going up against Creighton that's got 8 guys back, you lose to them in November, but maybe you're better than them in February, but it doesn't matter. Or you would have a better chance of beating them in February. So the league is hurt by that. And that's part of what this discussion is about, is finding ways to, and it's not just for them. It's been suggested for some of the other teams in the league to change how you schedule. ACC teams aren't going to be punished because of their schedule, so to speak. They're going to win games, you win games. And then suddenly your net is higher in February because of that. And that's what most of the talking heads look at. They look at numbers because they can't possibly see everybody play. And that's what stirs the narrative. That steers the narrative. And hopefully the net will be gone soon. And my suggestion for years has been get a bunch of retired coaches who still have some juice. Get Mike Bray and get
Seth Greenberg.
I mean, he's
been out for a longer, but something like that.
He's a talking head, but Jay Wright. Get a lot of guys like that and have them, their job's to watch basketball around the country on TV and in person. They meet every month, and then they're the ones who basically decide what the tournament is. But the only problem with that, and this was a person said this too, that one of the people I talked to about it, is that there's a lot of coaches that want to scratch a lot of backs.
Yeah, that's true.
So there might be more of a bias in that process, but maybe have them be half the process.
Yeah.
You weigh the NET versus what those guys say and then see what matches and go from there.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's something that, again, NET needs to be tweaked. It needs to be changed. A better system needs to come along. But in the meantime, if you're North Carolina and you've got the pull that they have in a state that loves basketball as much as North Carolina does, make it work in your favor a little bit. I think it's a no-brainer, and be interesting to see if they do end up doing that based on some of the conversations you've had. So we'll go ahead and wrap this drop up right there, AJ. If you guys like the idea, go ahead and like the video below. Get involved on Twitter, Facebook, or on our website, TarHillIllustrated.com. We want to hear from you guys. So let us know what y'all think. And the easiest way to do it, like I said, is just like the video below if you like this idea. And we'll see how many people agree with it pretty easily. So I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another daily drop. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell as well, because we're uploading 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, with every one of these drops. So if you want to be notified as soon as it comes out, hit that notification bell and your phone will do just that. Appreciate y'all watching. See you on the next one. Thanks.
Thanks.